Welcome to Dennis Money's 2 Cents, your weekly recap of headlines and stories. I am Matt.
And I'm Rabih.
Yes, there was only two of us today and only one topic. Two of us, one topic. So a little bit different today. And please forgive my preamble for a moment. We want to address the fact that this is a sensitive, complicated situation, right? And topic that we're going to hit. And we're trying to, Rabih and I have talked for how long, Rabih, before we've even jumped on here?
Like an hour,
probably. It is not lost on us that we are a financial planning firm for dentists, investment management firm for dentists, and we are not professional reporters. We are not political. We're not here to talk politics in any way. But on the other side of this, we feel we'd be remiss if we didn't address on a show that is a weekly recap of headlines and stories. We feel like we'd be remiss and a little bit tone deaf if we didn't address what's happening, right, with the war in the Middle East and this conflict. So that's what we're going to talk about today. But the angle we want to take, again, is not one of taking sides in any way and not making this political. That is not our job. Our angle here is talking about more of how we got here from a factual standpoint, kind of giving a recap. I will say this, Rabih is probably more informed on this than 99% of people out there. I think that I would guess, Rabih, just based on our conversations and how well-versed you are in this. Again, we're not claiming we are professional reporters, but Rabih is so well-informed and has a lot of knowledge to share on this of just, again, how we got here. And then also the other part of this is just from a kind of macro level, kind of big picture, kind of socioeconomic and impact to investors, right? War in general, and kind of what we can kind of take from this and what's happening kind of, again, socioeconomically, not only in the region, but also worldwide, the impact on America, the impact on global geopolitics and economics. Is that a fair preamble, Rabih, would you say?
Yeah, that's fair. You stayed pretty impartial. And
okay.
Growing up, I wouldn't say I know more than 99% than people. Like, I'm not a political expert. I don't claim to be, but I would say growing up in the region, I'm born and raised in Lebanon, has its perks.
Yeah.
Although bad perks in this situation. But I've had this conversation so many times throughout my life, and there's kind of a narrative that we can explore today. And I know that we are investment management for financial planning that preaches long-term investing, and with that, we still publish a weekly podcast called 2 Cents. And I think it's important to emphasize that the point of the podcast has never been a call to action, but more of an opportunity for us to communicate with our clients and our supporters, but two, because people are entrusting us with their money, and we are there to tell them, hey, invest for the long term. And you can't ignore the elephant in the room that every single week something is happening in the market. So this podcast has been nothing but an opportunity to walk through the uncertainty together, talk about the current events, just to uphold the idea that even if there are stuff happening in the outside world every single day, this should not drift you away from a long-term investing plan. And it happens that this week the conversation is about war, and it's a very hard conversation to have, but we're still going to do it, and we will be navigating the uncertainty of that and talk how about that affects the money you guys are entrusting us.
That's well said, Rabih. That sums it up, as why we're even talking about this, right? Is we manage a lot of money for our clients, and this is an impact. We talk about uncertainty, to your point. And it goes without saying, though, I think one very, very across the board kind of opinion we can all have is like, I think this is just, it's sad. Like, we're all very sad. Again, it goes without saying of what's happening. I don't think anyone ever wants to see this. So with that said, let's jump in again to this only topic we have. We don't know how long we'll take on this. Hopefully we're not going to go, we'll keep this kind of normal time, hopefully. But let's talk, Rabih, just let's start with kind of how, like, we got to this point. We're now 9 days removed from the attack in Israel. let's maybe just kind of give maybe a summary of kind of how we got to this point.
Yes. Are we starting from like
Yeah, you're like
religions?
you're.
No. I think a decent starting point would be when Israel became a country in that region and how that has followed through and built upon events to get to this stuff. So most history books would tell you that creating a national state of the Jew in the land of Israel/Palestine was first mentioned in a statement by the British Ministry of Foreign Affairs called the Balfour Promise, where it said we would want to give land to Israel, to Jews, to form the country of Israel.
1948.
1916.
Oh no,
And
we're going way back.
no,
Okay.
it's only a couple sentences. So 1916, and at that time, the whole region where we now know as Israel, Palestine, Lebanon, Syria were under the Ottoman Empire, which was like an empire that ruled the area for 400 years. By the end of the First World War, the Roman Empire actually fell apart, and it was lands for grab. And France and the UK actually took over that land and brokered a secret agreement, also in 1917, called the Sykes-Picot Agreement. And in the agreement, they actually drew the borders to what current Palestine, what current Lebanon, what current Israel, what current Syria look like. And it's very important to like acknowledge that in that area of land, Christians, Muslims, and Jews lived and existed. It is their home. Fast forward till 1948, a conflict happened in the area where due to settlements, due to purchase of real estate in that region, and due to military support, we would say the state of Israel, as we now know it, existed and was acknowledged by United Nations. And that created a big tension between Arabs and Israelis in that region. Fast forward to multiple conflicts, the Six-Day War, the Yom Kippur War, where you got Syria and Egypt, while they were one country back then, but they decided to attack Israel. The war took 6 days. The Arabs lost that war, and in a sense, Israel cemented its position as a strong military power and intelligence power in the region. And since that, they call it the Middle East problem for a reason. Like, it hasn't been easy to solve. A lot of countries and, even presidents looking for a good achievement on their, legacy, tried to solve this war. It couldn't happen.
Yeah, it's always a debate topic in presidential debates. Yeah.
Yeah, like if you solve that, you're a goat of presidents, right? It's important. And after multitude of battles and many wars left and right, in around 2002, they were able to come to the international community, kind of settled on a two-state agreement between the Palestinians and the Israeli, giving them each their state with like fair rights. And although there has been a global support of that resolution, it hasn't been implemented. And it hasn't been implemented due to internal, conflicts of interests, motives of certain countries, and just the fact that there's been a lot of war and trauma that it's not easy to resolve.
A lot of history here. Yeah.
To jump even fast forward to that, currently you've got Israel as a country that is a very strong military power in the region, a strong technology hub for the global economy. And at the same time, you got Palestinians living in Palestine that are in a very different socioeconomic state, and in a land that does not provide them the opportunity and sometimes the rights they need to have a prosperous, fulfilling rights. That has opened gaps for extremist groups to nurture, and open gaps for regional powers to try to capitalize on that opportunity to foster their agendas in this fertile land called Israel, or wherever there are Palestine, wherever there are people who are impoverished. So as of right now, we are day 9 into a war between Hamas, which is a militant organization openly supported by Iran, and the Israel government on the land of Israel and in Gaza Strip. And a lot of people have died. But what we are interested to talk about right now is that, and why we went through all this history, is that, why is this one different? A war between Palestinians and Israeli has been there since 1948. Why is it now different? And the answer would be is because a war just doesn't happen because two parties fought. A war requires a local, a regional, and an international interests to align in a certain way to fuel this war. And I think that's what we would be more interested in looking at today, because that affects financial markets more than ethno-religious war or a war over land. But what are the interests of all the countries in the region? What's the interest of global superpowers, and how that would, after all, affect portfolios and investments and people who are, living on the other side of the planet, thinking what they should be doing to immune themselves from such risks.
Yeah, no, that's a great history. And I just want to acknowledge I didn't pull out 1948 just out of thin air. It was there was a reason why I said 1948. You threw out 1916. I was like, wait, what am I talking about here? But 1948 was the kind of international agreement of the establishment of Israel, as we kind of know in modern day, right?
In the United Nations. Yes.
Got it. So that's a great summary, I think, in history, although accelerated. Obviously, it was a very kind of high level summary. I think it's important to kind of at least establish some kind of some context of how we got to this point. And then I guess we were talking a little bit before, talking more about kind of, again, 9 days ago, there was this attack. We were talking about kind of what led to that, even just more recently with this peace agreement. You want to talk a little bit about that, of how that kind of maybe led to where we are today with this?
Yes. Yeah, I think the most important part is like the timing of it. Like, why did it happen now? Like, we know what happened, we know how it happened. You can see them on the news everywhere.
Yep.
But why now? I will have to give you some background about the region. So,
yeah, for sure.
Let's start locally. We know that Lebanon, my home country, borders Israel from the north, and Lebanon and Israel are not at war, but they don't have a peace treaty amongst them, and their maritime borders were still a dispute until last year, where under U.S. sponsorship, they went in and established maritime borders between Israel and Lebanon. And the reason they did that was because of the existence of gas in the territorial water of both Israel and Lebanon. And the existence of that gas also extend across the whole Israeli shoreline, which includes the area that its shore is Gaza. So let's keep that in mind from one perspective. The second perspective is related not locally, but globally. After the withdrawal of the US from Iraq, Afghanistan, and their global shift and focus towards China for this century, they created a power gap in the Middle East, and regional powers have been trying to fill that power gap, because that's politics. Every country is trying to strengthen its position. And the dominant players in that, power grab has been Israel, has been Iran, has been Saudi Arabia. We would focus on Iran's role in the region currently, where as part of their expansion, they have been sponsoring, again, in impoverished, fertile land of extremism, groups of people. They would been taking them to Iran to train them, giving them salary, and recruiting them under the ideology of what the Iranian regime thinks is best in their version of the word. And out of these are Hamas in Palestine, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and Houthis in Yemen. And now you've got for Saudi Arabia, it's just a global power with a new crown prince, and he's trying to make his mark in history, right? So you got this balance between Israel's position in the world, militarily and technologically, Iran's agenda and their current power profile through different militant groups, and then Israel and then Saudi Arabia with their economic aspirations for growth and projects worldwide. All of these interacting together created a certain type of balance that they neglected the Palestinians in a sense, until in 2017, where during the Trump's presidency, under the Abraham Accords agreement, we started seeing Arab countries normalizing relationships with Israel, which is definitely new to the region, given that since 1948, Arabs and Israelis were always at war, and now we're seeing them normalizing relationships, creating peace treaties, opening up to each other's borders for tourism, which is a big shift in the region. And just that a change in the dynamics of the region will change how those regional superpowers are calculating their position and how strong they are. So up until last month, the US have been trying to broker a peace deal between Saudi Arabia and Israel. And that would, and Saudi media have went on and said multiple times that while they are open to normalize relationships, they would want in return some rights and advantages to the Palestinians. And if that had gone through, that would have compromised the existence of militant groups like Hamas in Palestine, because the reason Hamas exists and the Palestinians are okay with it existing within their borders is because it tells them, I'm here to protect you from Israel. And if a peace deal has been brokered between Saudi Arabia and Israel, where enough rights have been granted to the Palestinians, there wouldn't be a reason to have a militant group backed by Iran
lose some justification there.
Exactly, live in your land. So the timing has been very important for Iran to keep its stronghold and its expansion. It's non-traditional, but its expansion in the region. They wanted to put an end to that peace agreement happening between Israel and Palestine. So under the umbrella of Palestinians trying to get back at Israel, Iran, through Hamas, went in and launched an attack that, under the eyes of the international community, would make it harder for a peace deal between Saudi Arabia and Israel to go through. And because it's politics and we don't know where it goes from there, this just was a move on a chessboard that we will have to wait and see how it fits in global factors. So to zoom out and summarize it all, while it is a ethno-religious war about a land between Israelis and Palestinians, the fact that regional powers had their interests, whether it was to normalize agreements, relationships with Israel for economic reasons and security reasons, or whether it was to maintain a stronghold on the regions, as in the case of Iran. This fueled it to become much bigger, and that's why the US is heavily involved, and we will see how negotiations go forward from there and how the shape of the Middle East would go around. And I'll stop here.
No, that's great, man. I mean, such a good summary and hopefully giving some context just in our conversations we've had. Again, it's super helpful and insightful to get to, because again, you're so well informed on this. And of course, there's so much going on with news outlets. Obviously, this is something that's like dominating the headlines. So it's good to, I think, have these conversations. And like you said, we're not, our job, we don't feel, is to give, to make this political in any way, but hopefully just give some context to what's happening. I think that's a really good explanation that you just gave there. Let's talk more just with a few minutes that we have left. Let's talk more again, not that we're saying we have action items here out of this, but maybe just giving some context around the impact to investors or things to be thinking about, right? Both here in America, maybe globally. Obviously, we can talk more just about principles like we've talked about before we even went on. There's a lot of lessons to be learned here from, again, purely from an investment standpoint and philosophy standpoint. But let me just talk about that, Rabih, just the impact to investors and things to be thinking about there.
It would be very important. This applies not to just this war, but this is a very good example as well. Usually when wars happen, the data shows us that the countries where the war breaks out, you see a recessionary push, or it's like a recessionary trend. So a war puts an economy into a recession. And because your businesses are not working anymore, your airports, your hospitals, your schools, they are all shut down. Businesses as well. This drops, the cycle of the business and puts you in a recession. Whereas in a globally very intricate global trade economy, the one that we live in right now, if the country plays a role in global affairs, when that country goes into a war, it creates inflationary pressure across other countries. So if we go back for the Russian-Ukraine war, the fact that a war happened while the Russian economy and the Ukrainian economy took a hit and went into recession, for importers of gas and oil and importers of wheat, we saw that inflationary pressure affect other people in the market. So for the US, it's going to be inflationary pressure, depending on what the exports are from Israel and Palestine. In our case, Israel is a big exporter of gas as of recently, and they are a big hub for technology companies and the push of new technology that makes work more productive. So
when you say gas, by the way, are you talking natural gas?
Natural
exporter?
gas.
Okay.
Yeah, from their sea. So that what would happen to an international investor if for US investors, they would see an inflationary pressure. And that is interesting. But what would be more interesting is the position of the US. Given that the US is the strongest economy in the world and it's the largest player in terms of politics around the world, it is viewed as the safe haven, the safe asset. So while there is an inflationary pressure that would, we know that high inflation brings bond prices down. Given that there's a high inflation pressure that would affect bond prices to go down, the fact that the US and its position in the world are where they are, the fleeing to safety overrules that inflationary pressure, and actually bond prices goes up because everyone's trying to park their money in safe treasury bonds.
Because of the uncertainty, because of the fear. Yeah.
Because of the uncertainty. So for a developed country that is not considered a safe haven, they would see more of an inflation pressure. But for the US in specific, where it is a safe haven, you would see money flocking into treasuries. When that happens, interest rates go down, and actually equity markets go up. So interest rates were at their high 2 weeks ago due to like strong retail report, CPI going sideways, all those stuff we talk about every week. And the sentiment, the main narrative was like inflation is taking longer than expected and interest rates were staying high, keeping bond prices lower. But last week, interest rates dropped below their all-time highs for a while, simply because there's an influx of new money buying bonds that
because of this dynamic you're talking about.
Just because now people are flocking to safe assets, and the narrative that, hey, US Treasury is the safest investment out there overwhelmed the narrative that, hey, there is inflation and that's taking a little bit too long to get rid of, and that hurts bond prices. So narratives play a really big role in how money moves around. And that's the impact on equity markets. Currencies will move as the money moves. Like if the money is going to the US, the dollar is expected to go up, right?
Yep.
So currencies and fixed income are kind of easier to understand how they are going to be moving. Whereas for equities, it's much more tricky because businesses compete, and if now Israeli tech companies are losing their business, it's going to be picked up by other businesses, and that would be reflected in earnings. So that might be a good boost to competitor equity markets. But also, you're betting on the war. You're betting on the outcome of the war and who's going to be the winner out of the war, because data has been showing us that usually the country that wins the war is the country that has its equity market outperform, because the other scenario might be that the equity market couldn't exist anymore. So I think the principle for equity markets is the importance of global diversification is now needed more than ever, because if this war spreads out and becomes a regional war, it's a local war right now, but it becomes a regional war, and countries are pumping money and there is a higher uncertainty, usually the countries that lose war take a big hit on their equity markets. And given that you can't predict that, like some people have the guts to say that they can predict the market. I don't think anyone has the guts to say that they can predict wars. So
would we call that guts? Would we call that guts? Trying to predict or saying you can predict the market? I don't know what we'd call that.
Overconfidence bias.
Yeah. Hubris, maybe. Yeah.
So it's very interesting. Back in the Second World War, there were countries that had functioning financial markets. We're talking like Yugoslavia, which is a country that does not exist anymore. It's now like replaced by Bulgaria and Croatia. And
we were talking about what happened to Russia, right, in their markets.
Exactly. Like right now, although the Russian equity market, stock market still exists, but you don't have access to trade in it. So in a sense, you took 100% loss on your investment there.
Just poof, like gone. The market just was gone to the international investor, at least.
To the international investor. So while we always preach that, hey, stay invested in the index, the only way the index can, you lose money on it on the long run if the country doesn't exist anymore, and we laugh about it. Well, this is a reality. Like when the whole global orders, shifting and changing, and new countries are forming and countries are disappearing, financial markets are just part of it, and it would disappear. So it happened to Russia and Ukraine. The war happened between Israel and Palestine. Who can immunize us from a war happening in a bigger financial market in the future that would pose a risk that you lose your exposure to the whole sector? So during uncertainty, I would definitely make sure that I'm globally diversified as much as I can.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. I mean, we're seeing firsthand, again, acknowledging the sadness and the realness of war, right? But if we just talk, and we don't want to approach this too sterilely, right? And not acknowledge that, but just from an investor standpoint, to your point, Rabih, of just now more than ever, preaching the importance of these principles like global diversification, and the thing that comes to my mind when you talk about when you're doing such an incredible job of giving this summary, breaking all this down, the word that kept coming to my mind is just complex. Like just how complex all of this is, of like all the different push and pulls of not only what's happening obviously with this specific conflict we're talking about, but everything you just highlighted from an investor standpoint, right? So the audacity to say that, like when you come back to this idea of someone saying they know how to time the market, just this 25 or 30-minute summary of this one thing that's happening, and from an investor standpoint, like to claim you know what's going to happen next with this, and the impact, like you're saying, the inflationary impact of what happens outside that region, right? But then the impact of money actually moving because of the psychological aspect and how the impact that has on prices. Like everything you're highlighting, I'm like, how could you ever pretend to know what is going to happen next from an investor standpoint?
Position yourself in a way that you don't get hurt so much if it goes in a bad way.
Yeah. Diversification, right? That's the only thing from an investor standpoint that really, if anyone's, I could give you two basically core things here. And again, this is not action items, these are principles: diversification and time. Like those are basically the two kind of main things when it comes to investing that are going to lead to the highest possible likelihood of results is being properly diversified and then giving yourself enough time to see the results. Right. And be able to, from an investor standpoint, weather the storms of what's happening now. Like when we see, what's happening and the fear, the uncertainty that comes from it, and being able to stay the course and stick with your investment strategy. Right. We're not saying it's easy, but we're saying that's how you capture the actual returns over the long term. So, Rabih, this has been great. But it sounds weird to say that, but just, this has been informative. This has been informative. Anything else that you want to add or summarize before we end this?
No, I just put a disclaimer out there that I am sure that I did not give the subject justice for both Israelis and Palestinians. And but yeah, please excuse me. My job is to help people navigate financial markets and help them invest them. And I'm not a reporter, but given that I was born in that region, I've been exposed to it a lot that I can and I've heard multiple opinions to be able to hopefully give you an objective analysis as much as possible.
Yeah, no, well said, Rabih. And that's the whole point, right? Is objective analysis as much as we possibly can. And we said to start the show, we are not reporters. We are not claiming to be. And we are not interested in it's not our job to get into politics and giving opinions on this and taking sides on that. What we're trying to do, to your point, is just inform as best we possibly can, acknowledge what's happening, right? I think we'd be remiss to not acknowledge what's happening and try to give a little bit of, hopefully, some perspective on the investment side, while also acknowledging, again, just the pure sadness of the situation. So, to your point, a lot more to come. We're 9 days in, and if we have to circle back on this as things develop, I think we certainly will. To your point, hopefully we did it justice just from, and we have, like, hopefully you'll notice the intention we had behind this, and you'll give us some grace in our lack of the ability to be professional reporters here.
Yeah, and I really hope I don't have to do a second episode.
Yeah, hopefully we don't. We don't have to. We can just call it now. We'll just say this is one of one. So,
okay.
Rabih, thank you so much for your being so informed and sharing your knowledge with everybody. Hopefully, it was helpful and informative and insightful for everybody. Thank you for listening, whether you're listening live or on the podcast. We very much appreciate it. That was our 2 cents. Until next time, bye-bye.